Today on the podcast, we are honored to welcome Adelina Chalmers, widely known as the Geek Whisperer, trusted advisor to CTOs, VPs, and heads of engineering on building tech strategies, accelerating delivery, and demonstrating bottom line impact. With a passion for helping engineering leaders transition into strategic executives, Adelina has worked with tech professionals at companies ranging from startups to enterprise with over 100,000 employees. She enables engineering leaders to improve performance by 2 to 5 times, secure vital resources from CEOs and CFOs, and transform their teams into high performing powerhouses. Beyond her advisory work, Adelina is an acclaimed speaker, business strategist, and leadership mentor. She has been recognized as one of Computer's Weekly most influential women in the UK Tech 2022 and has won multiple speech contests for her ability to communicate complex ideas with clarity and impact. She is also a guest lecturer at Oxford Said Business School, where she teaches executive leadership in AI and business strategy. Her practical, no fluff approach has helped CTOs navigate challenges, align with the C suite, and scale the impact as business leaders. In today's episode, we will explore how tech leaders can develop an executive mindset, align engineering with business goals, and thrive in high stakes environments. Welcome, Adelina.
Thank you very much, Nate. Thank you for having me.
I thank you for your accepting our invitation. I'm very glad to have you here today and seeing all of your background and all of that experience and challenge that you had faced. I am wondering what moment in your life defined who you are today.
That's a really interesting question because I'm not sure there is one particular moment. Who I am today is a kind of a core mix between who I grew up wanting to be and also who I developed whilst going through a lot of challenging situations. So it's a very deep question, I'd say, but I'm not sure there's one particular moment that defined who I am today, if that makes any sense.
And could you tell us a little bit more about the way that you grow up that had influentiated?
Um, so how my upbringing has influenced my views on the world? Well, my mom was a scientist. Well, she's a chemical engineer, and my dad was a chief financial officer. And it was very interesting for me to see that someone who was extremely intelligent, like my mother, often struggled to negotiate with people or influence people who thought about business and about finance. And I think, my mother, she used to say that if the world was run by engineers, it would be a much better place. And I agree with her with a caveat that I think engineers are some of the best people to run the world, but without business acumen and empathy, I think they can be also terrible leaders if they don't have that strategic view of the world. But I think engineers are some of the most amazing people in the world. That's why I'm working with them. And this is why, when I was growing up, I always, all my friends were into mathematics, physics, chemistry, computer science. So these people have always been my friends and my people. So that's kind of how my upbringing has influenced my views on the world. Is that I think engineers are phenomenal leaders and they are some of the best leaders in the world, but without business acumen and a strategic understanding of how things operate and empathy as well for humans, I think they can also not be necessarily the best leaders.
Understood, and I like what you had mentioned over emphasis because we have realized it is a very important part of the leadership to have empathy, not only to understand and put themselves in the place of the persons that they are leading, but also remind how they have been led before it.
Mm.
This brings me to the next question: that how has been your greatest struggle, and how did you overcome it?
I mean, for me, I suppose maybe one of the biggest struggles has been that I nearly died from COVID twice. I actually used the reverse engineering skills to fix my own health because doctors said there was nothing they could do. I think one of my biggest struggles has been trying to recover from the aftermath of COVID and nearly dying from it. And I think working backwards using reverse engineering skills, trying to figure out, kind of what's causing it, what could be causing it, the long COVID side of it as well, and understanding how I can fix that, and looking at the evidence, following the trail of evidence, following the bug fixes in the in the system, like looking at what's the bug report saying, either blood test or the brain scan or whatever else, what is the bug report pointing to, and then following up from that and looking at where that could lead, and also looking at the background, what's the context of this health, what medication have I been on beforehand. So I think reverse engineering my health, you know, um, reverse engineering back to health, has been a lifesaver for me, literally. And I think that was one of the biggest struggles because for a while I wasn't sure I would ever recover. I'd ever be able to walk again. At my worst, I was unable to feed myself, unable to go to the toilet on my own. So it was extremely, extremely difficult. I only had 30 minutes a day when I was conscious and able to do anything. So, and I used those 30 minutes a day to basically try and fix myself.
I'm sorry to hear that, and I'm very glad that you made it and you did it twice.
Thank you.
And during COVID, it was, for everyone, right, was a very different and unusual time where we start to also struggle with mental issues that we was not used to. And we are talking here about lack of confidence. We are talking here about burnout. We are talking about fear and many other feelings that we have once we lose the touch with the world. It had something that you would like to share with us that you had also notes in that time.
I mean, I've had 10 years ago, I had severe depression, and recently, actually, I had part of recovering from the really bad illness that I had with COVID. I had quite bad, well, you call it burnout. I think my therapist called it, mental breakdown, essentially. I think in those moments, I think they make you realize what the important things in life are and what happiness truly is. And I think, I think a lot of us, don't necessarily value our health until our health is no longer there. For me, it was certainly a bigger wake up call. My mother always told me since growing up that your health is your wealth. Your health is the most important richness you have. But I think I didn't believe her until this happened, actually. And for me, the kind of path to recovery was taking the foot off the pedal and just trying to just enjoy the little moments, which is not always as easy as you might sound, because obviously, I was very lucky to be able to live on savings for nearly a year, but maybe not everybody can do that.
Yes, that is true. It shows as well that you are very strong, not only your body but also your mind. It seems that you have been working out on that through your whole life, right?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, for me, if I'm super blunt, life has never been super easy. Like for me, I was born with various health issues, literally from day one, and life has never been easy. And I actually often find that life is quite a struggle, actually. And I've worked very, very hard for everything I've achieved. In fact, my ex-husband, he studied at Cambridge University computer science, and I moved to Cambridge for him, actually. And he said to me, "You're the most self-made person I've ever met." And I thought, well, that's such a lovely thing to say because, yeah, it's true. I suppose I've never ridden on the coattails of anybody, if you know what I mean. Everything I've built has been through my own struggles and hard work. But it doesn't mean I haven't paid a price for it. I think my health has taken a knock because of it sometimes. I'm very lucky in that sense. Very lucky.
How have your dreams and goals evolved over the years, Adeline?
When I was younger, and I'm in my early 40s now, but when I was younger, I used to dream of being busy all the time. I used to always want to be busy, and I always wanted to, well, have all these accolades and recognition, and be really kind of well known in my field and well respected in my industry and all the rest of it. And Those are things are nice, but actually the way things have changed for me now is that I seek much more peace and quiet and actually wanting to only work the things that make me smile and make me happy rather than working on things that I know would advance my career, if that makes sense.
Understood. I had talked to someone before, and this person mentioned something similar, however, in the way that earn or learn, something like that.
If you can do both, then that's fantastic. And I did a lot of that in my career as well. Sometimes when the earn becomes bigger than the learn, then it's time to move on.
And who has been the most influential person in your life and why?
The most influential person in my life, probably, to be honest, my mother. I know it probably sounds cliche, but she was a scientist, what she still is, a chemical engineer, and she built a lot of patentable stuff, and all of the patents of the products she created are in her boss's name. None of them are in her actual name. I think she's influenced me a lot because she's helped me understand that I need to talk about how good I am at my job rather than expecting other people to praise me, because that might never happen. Not be obviously rude about it, or brash or whatever, but confident, assertive, being able to demonstrate value, which is different. And I think my mother's taught me a lot of great lessons in life, I have to say. And I would say probably she's one of my biggest influencers for sure. I think often we have to look closer to home and not, believe in icons and tech bros or tech gods, to necessarily be the people who influence you.
I see. I like what you said, and this also goes in the direction as you mentioned about how your goals had evolved, right? That you imagine that you're going to be working all the time. However, now you actually are able and you have maturity to choose what you would like to work in order to do this even better.
That's
That's
right.
that's
Yeah.
really
I never used to be selective about the people I worked with as well. I used to just kind of say yes to everything and everybody. And now that's not the case. Now I would say I probably turn down more work and people than I ever have before.
understood. And I have a big bomb for you. Can I drop this bomb on you?
Go on.
How do you define success? And do you feel you have achieved it?
Yeah, that's an absolutely excellent question. I love it. So to me, success, it means that you spend your time the way you want to spend it, not the way you have to spend it. And that means, like, for example, think about it. If you are employed somewhere, then you spend your time the way your boss asks you to spend it, and you don't necessarily spend it the way you want to spend it. You can't just take the day off and go to the beach because you fancy to doing so. You have to be there. You have to deliver that job. So to me, success is spending my time the way I want to spend it at any time in the day, anytime. To my mind, then I've not fully achieved success. I think I've achieved 90%. I'm 90% there, but I'm not 100% there because I still have to fulfill commitments, if you know what I mean. I'm someone who keeps my word. Say yes to something. I don't want to just cancel it, and I don't like to just not do things I've said I would do. Also, sometimes I do things that I don't necessarily want to do them anymore. I think it would damage my reputation or my relationship with people if I don't do them, even though I don't want to do them anymore. So I think success means that I frankly don't do any things that I don't necessarily want to do. So that's why I'm saying that I think I'm 90% there, but I'm not 100% there yet, I'd say, from that perspective.
Wow, I would like to congratulate for that. 90% is a really big deal, and we are talking about a person like you that is always working, is always busy, and also you are handling something that brings a big amount of stress. We are talking here about C-level, C-suite leadership, and senior leadership.
I mean, that's the thing, though. I started my business in 2011. So it's been nearly 14 years. I didn't start it yesterday. In fact, I have been running business since 2003. All 21 21 and a bit years now. You see what I mean? Like I'm not someone who started running a little business last year or 2 years ago. Like a lot of people, there's been an explosion of self-employed people in the last 5 years, maybe even 10 years. 10, 12 years ago, 13 years ago, I tell you, there was not half of the amount of people being self-employed like I am now. That was not really a common thing at the time. But it's taken me a long time. Do you know what I mean? It's a lot of practice, and running your own business is very scary because you never know where your income comes from. You don't have a guaranteed payment at the end of the month.
And that's exactly where came the more exciting thing about it, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's very exciting, but a lot of people can't cope with it because, they're worried about paying their bills. A lot of people live month to month. But if you don't get
Yes.
paid, and I know so many people that started their businesses when I did in 2011, none of them are in business today. None of them. And that's because, some of them realize that this is too tough. They can't deal with it. They change their minds, whatever. But some of them just couldn't even afford, they didn't have enough cash flow to be able to pay the bills at the end of the year.
Yes, you are right. And we have been passed through a lot, actually. We had, for example, during 2000s, we have, if I'm not mistaken, the dot-com bubble.
Yeah,
Between 2008, 2009, we have the housing bubble, right? The crash.
yeah,
And not counting Corona because the COVID was a pandemic situation. Let's say it was not about finance itself. It does affect, of course, but was not about that. And now we are 2022, 23, right? We start to have a huge amount of tech layoffs.
yeah, yeah,
We are living in very unstable times, and also I
yeah.
heard that companies they have a lifespan today of around 15 years, not like before anymore. That was 30, 60, even 100 years, right? And how has your perception of yourself changed over the years?
Well, I used to think that I have to please everyone. I used to think that I'm someone who is very flexible, very malleable, very understanding. And I realized that, and I used to have no boundaries, like I would just help people to the end of time without really a lot of thought of for myself and what do I get out of it. I think in the last 2 years, especially since I got ill, where I had zero energy, to spend on anything that was not crucial. I've learned that I do need to have boundaries. I do need to, I am actually sometimes, I am a bit of a control freak as well. It's what I realized when I was ill, and I'm not as flexible as malleable as I thought, because actually I have quite strong opinions about things. Sometimes I have quite high standards for a lot of things, and I am very unforgiving actually if people, I would say, are inconsiderate. That's one of my biggest challenges. One of the things that rubs me the wrong way is people being inconsiderate of others and or the environment around them or whatever it is. I really respect immensely someone who makes a mistake, but then they admit it, they own it, they apologize or whatever it is, and they just, you know, sort it out rather than trying to hide it, trying to blame it on someone else, whatever other deflection methods they might have. I've gone from being someone who didn't have a lot of boundaries and a lot of kind of criteria of what good looks like and accepting, working with everybody, to someone who's quite specific about what sort of people she wants to work with and what sort of things she will accept and what sort of things she won't.
I understand this sounds very profound to me because this change, as you mentioned, it comes with a huge amount of maturity and also reflection, right? And how did you get there?
I think, to be honest, making a lot of mistakes, and also when I was ill, it was hugely accelerated learning because when you're ill and you're unable to move, and the amount of when you have energy, you do start to realize that you only have, let's say, half an hour a day of energy. How are you going to spend it? You have to be extremely targeted. So at the time, obviously, I didn't spend it working. I didn't spend it on people who are wasting my time and using me. I spent it on getting better and reverse engineering my health and understanding what was wrong with me and why, and how could I get better.
That was a very tough move, and I'm glad that you made it twice.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you.
Adelina, how do you want to be remembered?
Someone who's very generous, someone who's kind but not nice. There's a difference between kindness and niceness. Niceness is when you don't tell people the truth. I want to be remembered someone who's very authentic. She'll tell you things you don't want to hear, but they're the things you should hear. And that's kind of I like people remembering me someone who's generous, but who's also very fair and very authentic and will not lie to you, even if it means that I lose out, which I've done many times. I've not lied to people, even though it meant I lost money, contracts, opportunities, whatever.
That is very important because you have a foundation and you stick to your values. This is very important to hear. Thank you. What advice would you give to the younger generation? So, as we see right now, we have the Generation Z. They are watching us and their parents as well struggle in one of the toughest market, most probably in the last century.
Yeah.
We will not know for sure until this whole mess is over. However, they are now fresh grads. They are out there looking for a position, looking for growth, and of course, they are looking for different things than what we had. We didn't question much about workplace. We didn't question much about the fact that we are going to office or not and things like that. And they start to question that, which I see that is very important. Would you give to the younger generation as advice, considering what we are passing through right now and what you know?
I mean, before offering any advice, there is something I want to say about Generation Z, because I'm a first year millennial myself. I think a lot of them are much, much smarter, wiser, and aware of things than we were. Even millennials, let alone Generation X and whatever else. And I actually have huge hope for the future when I meet someone who's, 10, 20 years younger than me, because they seem to be much more clued up about things than I was at their age. So that in itself, to be honest, that's one of the few things that gives me amazing hope for the future. Genuinely, it does. And I'm not just saying that. I truly am impressed every time I deal with someone of that age. I'm usually impressed just how good thought, how good thinkers they are. I'm genuinely impressed by that. I mean, when it comes to the job side of things, one thing I would say is that, frankly, 99% of what you will have learned at university doesn't apply in real life. I think understanding where you're adding value, and value doesn't necessarily mean money, it also means you're moving the needle in some direction from one person or another, but truly understanding what your client, because your employer is your client if you're going to go and be employed. What do they actually need, rather than taking things at face value, truly asking deep questions. And when someone tells you no, just know that the word no is not now. It doesn't necessarily mean never. And I think it's really important to remember that, because people often, especially in this day and age, people are not used to hearing the word no. Almost no sounds offensive to them, because they're so used to having so much politeness and maybe political correctness, whatever it is. But, like, people don't often say no. They kind of say this roundabout no, which is actually worse because you don't know where you're standing. You can keep trying. And I think no, interpreting no as not now, and understanding that someone is not necessarily rude to you if they don't want to work with you, or they don't want to do something. I think it's really important not to have an ego about those kind of things. And that's kind of one core thing. And I would say the other thing is that sales is the ultimate level of empathy. One of the execs in a bank that I worked with, her and I were talking about this, and she was saying that sales is the ultimate level of empathy. And I agree with her completely, because if you truly understand and take the time to understand what the other person needs, being your employer, your client, whatever, if you truly take the time to understand what they need, what they want, what would solve their problem, how big is the problem, is that really the problem they want solved, all of those things, I think you might discover that um, you are liked a lot and you have a lot of opportunities because everybody wants a solution creator rather than a blocker. And being the person who and having sales skills means having excellent understanding and communicating skills. And when people think, oh, I don't like sales. If you don't like sales, you don't know how to actually communicate with people. As simple as that. And sales are the core of every single, not just job, but in life in general as well. And I think sales skills are very important for everybody to learn.
Wow, I really love it what you said. And more as you express yourself, sale is also something extremely sophisticated because someone has a need or a problem that would like to solve, and there is a solution, and you're just gonna do that match, which is amazing, right?
Yeah.
And since you are an entrepreneur for many decades and you have a lot of experience and I'm pretty sure you will get used to the roller coaster,
Yes.
I would like to know what are common misconceptions people have about your role.
People often think that I have a magic wand and I'll be able to change their career or their chief technology officer. Like, oh, my chief technology officer is not delivering for the business. Can you work with them for a week and make them good? It doesn't quite work like that. I'm not a magician. I wish I was, because you would make things easier, probably. I don't know. But if someone doesn't want to change, I can't change them. They have to work with me to allow them to change. You know, they have to want to change. They want to apply the change that we're creating together, co-creating. And I think that's one of the probably the biggest misconception is that they think that I'm going to fix everything magically, woo, with magic, and that's just not how life works in reality.
Yes, you are an enabler by the core. What does work life balance mean to you and how do you achieve it, Adelina?
Well, who told you that I've achieved it? I told you about my 90. I mean, obviously, before I got ill, I had no work-life balance. I used to work 17-hour days. Um, and my life was my work. In fact, some friends all of my friends, I think, most of my friends were from work. And all of them were saying that I don't seem to have any hobbies outside of work. So I didn't have any work-life balance at all. But since I got ill, I think for me, work-life balance is you work to live, not live to work. And I used to live to work instead of the other way around. And I mean, look, work-life balance is a tricky one. I think it's different for everybody. I love what I do. Therefore, my work often is like a hobby. So if it's like a hobby, is it really work? I think that's one of the core questions I think people have to answer when they talk about work-life balance. Because you think about it, work is part of life, but you can't have work without life. Because if you're dead, you're not going to work, are you? But if you're alive, if you're living, you don't necessarily, you're not necessarily working. So to me, work-life balance is a tricky one because if you feel like you have no joy left, then it means that probably you're working not even on stuff that inspires you, or that energizes you. And I think that if it's work that energizes you, you probably don't see it as work. You see it as a hobby. You see it as joy. So work-life balance, I'd say, is a really tricky question that I never know how to answer, other than in the roundabout way I've answered it now, which is always, if nothing else, I always try to keep at least 2 hours a day with my partner. I think before that wasn't even a thing. See, I can't remember his full name, but the original Netflix CEO, he said that on a Tuesday he used to finish at 5 p.m. If there was an emergency in the company, it didn't matter. It had to end by 5 p.m. on a Tuesday, because on a Tuesday at 5 p.m. he was going to be back with his family, having dinner, going out for walks, and playing football together, whatever it was. And to me, that was a brilliant example of work-life balance, in the sense of, if the CEO of Netflix could go home when there was some sort of work emergency, then I think you can as well.
Yes, you brought a lot for us to think, and also this great example of the show of Netflix. I thank you for that. And you have final thoughts?
Have various chief technology officers very experienced from other companies. I bring into companies to do engineering reviews. When a company doesn't know why engineering is not performing and not delivering predictably. So the things that I do, I just advise chief technology officers on their careers and on their performance in the job, but also advise companies on why engineering is not operating in general. And we do engineering reviews and architectural reviews for them. But my core aim really is to help chief technology officers and scientists become true leaders and executives. Everything I do is around that. I have some videos and kind of webinars that I've put online. One of them is called How to Find a CTO Role in a Tough Job Market. A lot of CTOs struggle to find another job in the tough job market because actually they never had a brand. They never necessarily needed to demonstrate business impact. And this is why they're struggling in a tough market. In a tough market, the good CTOs have jobs. In a tough market, the CTOs that actually stand out in their industry have jobs. Anyone who struggles to find another job, I highly recommend watching that webinar, which is an hour, just over an hour, nearly an hour and a half. It's on my LinkedIn profile. People can see on my LinkedIn profile all of these videos lined up as well. I have a couple of Gumroad products like that I think are quite useful to people.